Undertale is debatably one of my favourite games of all time, an opinion only further cemented after watching the recent 10-year anniversary stream. The game is extremely efficient in taking a pre-existing expectation and subverting it. In video games you kill the enemy, in Undertale you get to know them. This is once again subverted, as you grant mercy to every monster in the underground, and then, when it matters most, at the very end, you are deprived of that option. You have to, despite every impulse, kill. And then, perhaps out of boredom or morbid curiosity, you go back and kill everyone. Toby Fox, creator of the game and friend of Masahiro Sakurai, had worked on other games before the development of Undertale, but his other strength lies in music composition. The Earthbound Halloween hack, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and a certain webcomic that I'll get to later are all phenomenal examples of his work. Because of this, I want you, presuming you're at least familiar with Undertale, to imagine that it wasn't a game, rather a standalone soundtrack. The OST could, with some imagination, portray the story of Undertale. A child falls from a mountain, and the underground goes empty. Revisiting the soundtrack after playing the game, there is a cohesive story told musically, but it's just not the same. Undertale is a game for a reason, and it executes that reason so perfectly that I could not imagine this story being told via any other medium. It could be a soundtrack, or a live-action movie, or an episodic cartoon, but it isn't, because that wouldn't work. So why does it work? Why is it a game? Or why is this a YouTube video? To answer that question, I'm not going to talk about Undertale anymore. In a rare act of restraint instead, I wanted to talk about other media that I believe has mastered its medium. Meaning, these pieces would not only fit no other art form better, but have also used said art form to their advantage. And one animated pilot in which I think its medium actively hinders its storytelling. In 2017, John Boyes published an article for SB Nation, a sports blog network under the Vox Media brand, titled "What Football Will Look Like in the Future." It's a speculative report on the existential conditions of American football as not just a form of entertainment, but as performance art that upholds American culture. Boyes has been a sports writer since the early 2000s, covering everything from Madden NFL to the launcher Larry Flight of 1982, and do you hear that? Do not be afraid, but something is terribly wrong. I am afraid that this video is going to disintegrate. Don't worry, nothing will be hurt, although you may be extraordinarily confused. I don't know. Something is terribly wrong. Something is terribly wrong. Something is terribly wrong. Something is terribly. I can't lie to you. The John Boyes article may have been published in 2017, but we instead find ourselves at first, after extraordinary confusion, to March 27th, 2043. 6,087 days after, by some cosmic mystery, human beings had lost the ability to age, to die, and to be born. The article, which has now transformed itself into a multimedia comic, does not follow the daily woes of this phenomena. It does not grant us access to the political implications or answer the myriad of practical questions you would have about this world, at least not at first anyway. Instead, it answers only the most pressing issue of immortality. What of football? This is just a sports article after all. I mean, the human race can no longer die or age. Later we've solved sickness and disease. With all that time to kill, why bother with war? Why bother with work? The only thing we have left is football. The sport in this near future, however, has to be modified to fit the conditions of a utopia. With the rest of eternity to enjoy, why limit a game to just 3 hours? What's the rush? 3 hours is nothing compared to the rest of infinity. What if these games stretched millennia, on fields that spanned states, with hundreds of players competing? It must be daunting, or at least a little exhausting. I mean, the vast intensity of a nationally beloved contact sport, with the pressure of a country's eyes on you for a lifetime. The rest of your lifetime. For the rest of time. Well, how would we know? We aren't inside the players' minds, we're just hanging out, perpetually, overhearing the conversation of 3 sentient spacecrafts, Pioneer 9, Pioneer 10, and the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, JUICE for short. All of these spacecrafts are, in actuality, genuine spacecrafts that were launched to space by NASA at various points in our history. For now, we'll focus on Pioneer 9, the protagonist of 17776. Pioneer 9 was a space probe launched in 1968, designed to record comprehensive measurements of the solar wind, solar magnetic field, and cosmic rays in interplanetary space. Between 1965 and 1969, Pioneer 9, we'll call it simply 9 from now on, was one of 5 other space probes launched on this mission. Pioneer 6 is still up there, operating, although no contact has been made since December 8, 2000. Pioneer 7 and 8 are also still extant, although potential contact is hypothetical. Pioneer E never made it to orbit. It was lost in a launch accident and thus never received a number. 9, which recorded significant observations of one of the most potent solar storms ever recorded, is the only one of the 4 in space to have ceased functioning. But what if it woke up? The little space probe that could is endlessly confused. This story, 17776, is the answer to all of its questions. But it's also about football. Don't forget about the football. One of 9's earliest questions in this story, and most interesting in my opinion, is why, in 15,000 years, have we not moved on? Not just from football, but from everything. Why haven't we, in a time equivalent to since the end of the Ice Age to right now, evolved? Biologically, sociologically, theologically, hell, sportsologically? Well, as it turns out, we just didn't want to. 10 explains that this final generation of civilization, all 8 billion of us that were born between 1910 and 2026, became perfectly content with our lives. It's funny, as a kid, for some reason, one of my biggest fears was that we had peaked, that this was it. Call it discontentment with my life as an 8-year-old or early onset unrealized ambition, but this story comforts that fear. We're not stuck, oppressed, or incapable of social progress. We're content. They wanted things, and they got them all. The end. Above all else, what this story excels at is taking complete advantage of and reinventing its medium. The news article disintegrates as we read it, collapsing under our feet. We're thrust into this story almost against our will. We click on a link titled "What Football Will Look Like in the Future," and we get to see it. If you are at all curious about the details of how such a hyperbolic game of football like this would work, including game 3887 that uses the entirety of Nebraska as a field in which the next point scored wins the game, or game 96,249 played between the Canadian border and the Mexican border, deadlocked for 13,000 years at the bottom of a gorge in Arizona. Or a game in which the possessing player is attempting to score an automatic win by hiding in his team's end zone for 10,000 years. Or hell, even if you partially give a shit about the Livermore Centennial light bulb, then I highly recommend you check out this story for yourself, but ironically, the intricacies of the games are not the purpose of this video. Rather, I want to focus on the medium of the story. Multimedia can be overwhelming for some readers, but it's important to know that John Boyes didn't choose to incorporate Google Earth recordings, collages of old advertisements, and animation on a whim. Well, he did it because it was fun, but he also did it to elevate this idea of technofuturism. Boyes is quite literally showing us what technology has to offer, while telling a story about where the same futurized technology can take us. We have to fend for ourselves as we explore this comic. The black background looking increasingly interplanetary, with a schematic on the bottom of every page looking almost like a map that tells us, or maybe allows us, to continue. Earlier this year, John Boyes announced a plan to release his newest project as a physical publication. This obviously kinda dismantles my entire argument here, but I'm still curious enough to want to check it out, if not only because of the hope that 17776 inspired within me. To the contrary of a utopia is a much more familiar dystopia, one of paranoia, of sickness, of death. In her book Uncanny Valley Girls, Essays on Horror, Survival, and Love, Zefir Lasovsky writes that you have to love to begin with in order to fear it being taken away. Death is itself about the life lived beforehand, the choices and connections made before an exit, the place before the fear begins. So, as you would expect, the world of No, I'm Not a Human is one of complete and overwhelming terror. We're introduced to this world with a news report. The sun is burning bright, hot, so hot that it can and will kill you. Don't even look outside during the day. Only at night is there any chance of solace. Our mission is ostensibly one of survival, but more than that, it's to ensure the survival of our community. People, both strangers and neighbours, must be welcomed into your home, but not before passing some tests. You see, the deadly heat is not the only enemy of this world. The news tells us that the heat has forced visitors to the surface, a group of barely sentient mimics who appear to be human but falter in behaviour or appearance in a way only recognisable through careful analysis. As people beg to be let into your home, you must decipher who is human. These tests are increasingly invasive. Check their eyes for redness, their teeth for uncanny perfection, their ears for bugs. These examinations are intentionally, though frustratingly, limited. With the blistering heat, you only have the energy to test so much in one day, not excluding checking yourself. After all, who's to say you haven't been turned into a visitor? Or perhaps you have been one this entire time. I had a strange moment of déjà vu when YouTubers en masse decided to check this game out because I could have sworn that they already had. But Mandela Effect conspiracists put the tinfoil hats down. I, much to my own relief, wasn't transported from an alternate universe where football matches last for 10,000 years and this game is an old cult classic. No, I'm Not a Human was originally part of the horror anthology Violent Horror Stories, which also featured lesser-known games like I Ate Old Man's Liver, Now This Bitch Is Mine, Sensation, and All Along the Toon Tower. All of these games are much more condensed, lasting no more than 30 minutes. It was this demo version that I remembered. The theme of each game in the anthology was pursuit, and this idea is entrenched throughout every second of narrative. Ultimately, the game is about deducing who is a visitor, but the story isn't. If anything, who the visitors are is irrelevant. The story is about paranoia, how fear and doubt can so quickly spread, the power of moral panics. I'm not sure why this is the book recommendations section of the video, but recently I've been reading Propaganda by Alec Carcasanes, which delves spectacularly into the origin and intention of moral panics. He writes that the volume, timing, frequency, and delivery method of news stories shape how we think about safety and crime, to create a profit-driven culture of surveillance and dread. Think about this in the context of No, I'm Not a Human. We wake up to constant ongoing reports of visitor sightings, to new methods of testing and the consequences of not following protocol. We have to pay for rations and ration our saves. We're even encouraged to bend to the will of FEMA, the government agency responsible for testing visitors. Although we ultimately discover that these tests are sanctioned executions. By the first night, you may be curious, maybe even apprehensive to test or question your house guests. But as the news reports continue to blare on throughout the nights, a player may find themselves trapped in a cycle of fear and suspicion. Before you can even recognize it within yourself, you've fallen victim to the moral panic. This is what I find phenomenal about the use of this art medium in particular. This is something I mentioned briefly in a previous video, but you, the player, are in total control. The protagonist is you, and this is obvious, sure, but it is exceedingly effective when reckoning with a topic like propaganda, and choices so dire as who lives and who must die. You don't, or at least I didn't, question the information being conveyed at the start of the game. The world is ending because the game says it's ending, so I have to kill. If you take a step back, let's actually think about these tests for a second. Check for a redness in the eye. Well, what if this guest has been crying? It is the end of the world after all. Or what if they've been smoking weed or haven't been sleeping? Check for shaven armpits or perfectly white teeth. Strange during the apocalypse, sure, but these things have been a standard of beauty for a significant time. I wouldn't think twice about someone latching onto these traits. It's the symbols of imperfection you need to look for to see who's a human. It's this doubt that drives the player to paranoia, especially when the mirror is turned on yourself. You have to smoke, bathe, avoid caffeine just to fit in with this new standard of humanity. Ultimately, it's a balancing act that would fit no other medium. No matter how the story ends for your playthrough, there will always be a hollowness deep in the pit of your stomach, with the knowledge that maybe living to repeat the cycle of fear tomorrow is a crueler punishment than death. A young man stands in his bedroom. It just so happens that today, the 13th of April 2009, is this young man's birthday. Though it was 13 years ago he was given life, it is only today he will blah blah blah. You know Homestuck. You might not know Homestuck, but if you've been online for at least an hour, then you've been exposed to Homestuck in one form or another. As a former Tumblr user, I essentially grew up Homestuck adjacent. I knew what this meant, who he was, I definitely knew who they were, but I couldn't tell you a single thing about the story itself, and after reading the comic earlier this year with some friends, I don't think I could tell you much more.
Anyway, a purifier.
No! No!
No! You decide to consult with the Colonel's bottomless wisdom. Good grief, this thing is huge. It could kill a cat if you dropped it.
I'll try my best to give you the gist, but be gentle with me. This story is longer than the Bible, with a fandom older than my functional memory. Homestuck is a multimedia comic created by Andrew Hussey, first launched on April 13th, 2009. The multimedia component includes interactive elements, flash game segments, text and animation, with an accompanying soundtrack to weave together a narrative that is ultimately about the relationship between simulacra, a decaying reality, and the determinism of fate. Homestuck, in its most summarized sense, follows the adventure of 4 kids, John, Rose, Dave, and Jade, as they're all immersed in a reality-bending video game called Spurb, while the world around them ends. Luckily, the main objective of this game is the creation of new universes, and since Spurb is a game, we have character classes, inventories, weapons, relationships, planets, and timelines to keep track of, but that's beside the point. With how integral online culture is in both the story and reading experience of Homestuck, I find it fitting that Homestuck helped define online culture. Like I said earlier, it was kind of impossible to avoid. This was a monumental reputation that Hussey, at one point, seemed to resent to some degree, calling the culture of fandom at large cult-like. But more importantly, you know that accompanying soundtrack I mentioned? Collaborators Mark J. Hadley and Clark Powell are just a couple of names in the Homestuck music contribution team, but Toby Fox is always at the scene of the crime. He composed music for the project back in 2010, eventually becoming the coordinator for the music team, and continuing as a composer for Hussey's other projects until 2020. With tracks such as Savior of the Waking World, Amphibious Subterrane, and Megalovania under his belt, not that Megalovania either, Toby Fox became a revered composer in the community. So, with that history lesson over, since we've circled back to talking about Toby Fox, let's try that exercise again. Imagining Homestuck in an entirely new context, a new medium. Just like with Homestuck, you absolutely have a sonically cohesive story told via the soundtrack, but in my opinion, Homestuck works as a hypertext fiction because it is, most literally, about hypertext reality. A generated simulation of life that is a reflection of the character's identity. Simulacra that becomes more real than reality. I could not imagine this story being nearly as effective in any other medium.
A young man stands in his bedroom. It just so happens that today, the 13th of April, 2009, is this young man's birthday.
I give up. I give up, I think. Yeah. I give up.